Hi, this is Melinda with Melinda Howard Art. Thank you for joining me today as I paint this black-capped chickadee being fed by hand. It's one of my favorite birds, and I'm so looking forward to painting it in a very loose and fun way. I'm really excited today to show you how I painted this black-capped chickadee on indigo handmade watercolor paper. I really love black-capped chickadees. They are my very favorite bird. I got the reference photo after watching some videos on my favorite YouTube channel called Leslie the Bird Nerd. I did a screenshot of one of the videos where she's feeding that little bird, and then I got permission from her to use it as a reference photo for a painting. The reason that I fell in love with this picture is because there's a scripture that it reminded me of, where Jesus said that we don't need to worry. He said, consider the birds of the air. They don't sow or reap or store up in storage barns, and yet my Father feeds them. I just really love that scripture. It's really meaningful to me. So I really wanted to paint this bird. And then I also wanted to mention really quickly that if you're a Patreon member and you would like to see a couple of bonus videos related to this project, then hit the link at the bottom of the video. And if you're interested in being a Patreon member, you can hit that as well. One of the videos that I have on there is how I drew this for the painting. See some tips and techniques in how I do an initial drawing for a painting. The other video has to do with this paper. This is indigo handmade paper, and I get it in large sheets on Amazon, and then I divide it in smaller pieces to create paintings. However, only the outside edges of the large piece of paper have this beautiful deckled edge that I really love in watercolor paper. So I have a technique to be able to get all four sides looking similar and looking deckled. So let's get started on this painting. And don't know if you've noticed, but part of it is already done. What happened was I forgot to hit the record button and worked for about 5 or 10 minutes before I realized that I wasn't recording. So what I'm gonna do is I got this scrap piece of the exact same paper and redrew the top part of this bird just to show you what I did to get this far. Now this is just the first layer. I'm going to be doing 2 to 3 different layers to get to the colors that I want it to be and the depth and darkness of tone that I want. So to do these first layers, I first wet the areas and then added some color and charged in a second color, and then did what I call crazy splashing the side as I was painting. So I'm going to show you that process so far, and then we'll go back to the actual painting. Wet the area that you want to paint on. And then I'm going to take a Payne's Blue Gray, which is a little bit cooler than the normal Payne's Gray, and I'm just going to drop in that color. And I'm doing a very light, very watery wash for this first layer. And from looking at the piece I've already done, you can see how much lighter it is once it is dry. Now I'm going to charge in this area just a little bit of ultramarine blue. I'm just going to drop it in, and I'll call it different things. Sometimes I call it dropping in, sometimes I call it charging. It just doesn't matter. You can see exactly what I'm doing there. On this back wing, I used just a regular Payne's Gray because I wanted it to not be quite as cool and blue colored as this area, and I'm making sure it's a nice, really light, wet wash. And then I charged in one of my very favorite colors, which is called Undersea green. And I'm just charging in a little bit of it. And now that I've done that, what I do, I call it crazy splashing. I get very watery consistency of the color that I want, and then I'm going to just jerk my hand like so to create some crazy splashing. And then I'm just going to maybe move around a little bit of it, not all of them. And when I dry my brush off with a paper towel and clean brush, I can touch the very center of these real heavy drops, and it will soak into the brush because it's what they call a thirsty brush. And I'm just doing this because I know these are going to take quite a while to dry, and so I just want to pick them up a little bit. I may even just rub out part of it there. I don't know. That's how I got to the point that you saw when you first started watching this video. So that's where we are so far, and I'm just checking to make sure I'm still recording and we're going to get started with the rest of the bird. Because I am doing layers, I want to start with the lightest value that I feel is there. I'm just going to start up at the top and then just let it bleed into that, and not like actually put my brush there. I'm going to use my larger brush. It's a number 12 Da Vinci Maestro, and I'm going to wet the bottom part of the bird here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wet farther up than I'm actually going to put the paint, and that way it will gradually move into that area without having a real harsh line. To make this color, I'm going to use raw umber, new Gamboge yellow, and a tiny bit of ultramarine blue. Now just at the top, I'm going to take some Payne's Gray because I see that the bird's feathers change to a sort of a gray color here. And I'm just going to place a little bit just here at the top, maybe to about right there. And it will bleed into this brown color. I also want to put a little Payne's Gray here at the bottom where his little legs start. I'm going to also take some of that same mixture and get it really, really watery, and I'm going to do some more splashing here, just right on the side of the bird. Now this is partially dry, so it's a little lighter, and I just want to work it in and let it kind of meet up. One thing I'd like to mention is that this paper, which is indigo handmade paper, I can do this trick that I can't do with any other paper. You can see here that this is starting to buckle because I didn't stretch the paper or pre-wet it or anything. But with this paper, I can use a hairdryer immediately after I finish getting that wet, and it will flatten. And if I do that every time I soak the paper and then it buckles a little bit, by the end I won't have a buckled mess. It will be all flat. So I'm going to do that really quickly and I'll be right back. Okay, you can see that the buckling is gone and it's gone back to flat. Plus, it also helps me to move on and do layers and not have to wait for it to completely dry. I'm going to use my Payne's Gray. I'm using a lot of Payne's Gray today. Now first I want to outline my eye with the black, and I'm going to make a decision about first the highlight. I'm going to be thinking about that before I start filling in. I want it to be an oddly shaped highlight. I don't want it to be a circle. It makes it look a little more realistic to have something oddly shaped. It has to do with what's around us and what the light source is, all that. And a bird's highlight is not going to be a single light because he's not inside. He's in a forest or around some trees. The highlight's going to be oddly shaped. And then I rinse off my brush and pat it down on my paper towel. And then I'm going to drag out kind of a moon shape at the bottom. Now this beak has a pretty strange angle. I'm not used to that kind of angle. You're looking up underneath his beak and his mouth is open, so you can see a little bit inside of his mouth as well. Around his face area, I don't want to be as loose because I want it to be the focal point. All right, let's go to his feet. And I'm gonna just start with a light wash of Payne's gray for his feet and legs. I'm going to take that same wash that I did in this color, which was raw umber, new Gamboge, tiny bit of ultramarine, and I'm just going to put this first light layer on. I don't know if it's a seed or a peanut, but whatever it is this little guy is holding. And I'm leaving just a little tiny sliver of white there for a highlight on it. So I've done my first layer over the whole bird, and now I'm going to do my first layer onto my hand and the seeds. So I ended up with a mix for the skin tone of, first I started with some Alizarine crimson and then added some new Gamboge and raw umber. I mixed that in and then put just a little bit of the opera pink. I like the color. First I'm going to wet the fingers. I'm going to rinse my brush, and then in a few places where I want it to be a little lighter than what I've applied, I'm just going to pull up a little bit of it. Like on the top edges of the fingers, maybe right here. Just wanted a little bit of the hand color underneath those seeds. I'm going to add a little bit of Payne's gray to, well, it's going to be partially Payne's gray and partially this color with the raw umber on these seeds. Just want to give them a first little wash. Some of them I think are sesame seeds, and some are peanuts maybe, or maybe a different kind of seed. I'm not sure what they are. Okay, that's my first layer. So at this stage, I have my first layer of everything that I'm going to paint, and most of it is dry. I'm going to use the hair dryer here just to make sure that's good and dry. Then I'm going to start at the top of the bird and just work my way down, adding the next layer. Here we go. Let's go ahead and go with the next layer, which I'm going to use a little less water and a little more paint. Now I'm going to rinse out my brush and dry it on my paper towel a little bit, and I'm going to pull up a little bit of this color and let some of the blue shine through to show just here where the sun is hitting his head. Give it a little highlight there. And we're going to do the same thing down here. My brush was just a little too wet. You can see it's not quite as dark, so I may have to do another layer after this one. I will come back and darken this with another layer after this dries. Okay, let's move over here to this. I want to do the same thing, but with a little bit lighter wash, which means a little more water, because I don't want it to get too heavy or too dark. And I am pulling up, getting a little bit of kind of a fuzzy look there. And I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to pull up with my brush into that area up here and leave it lighter. I'm gonna do this, cover up most of the bird so I don't get any green in it. This tail is sort of tricky. So it's actually layers of feathers, and I want to show that without having a bunch of lines here. And I don't have to show every single layer of tail feather here. I'm gonna leave that and let that dry. Since I dried this, I'm gonna darken this area again. Up in this part, I want to leave that. I really love how this is looking, and I don't want to mess with it, and this needs to stay about that tone of color, but I want to add some darker color along the edge up a little bit around here because I want the bird to look round, and he's got shadow under here because the sun's shining down this way and this is underneath him. So I'm going to pre-wet this area again. I'm going to get the same mixture with the raw umber, new Gamboge, and a little bit of ultramarine, but I'm going to make it a little darker, so I have a little bit more of the raw umber. Just going to pull this down into the dry paper just to give it a little bit of fuzzy, feathery look in different directions. I'm also going to, right on the edge, add a little bit of the Payne's gray. Just a little hint of it. I'm wetting my brush and just blending it in a little better. I'm going to get that same color because I still have some on my palette, and maybe a little bit more of the raw umber, and just gonna do some more of this crazy splashing. I don't really have any rhyme or reason with what I'm doing, except I'm just playing around with it and trying stuff, and without hopefully going too far. So add a little bit more dark color just in a few spots on his tail. Okay, I'm gonna leave that tail now. That's gonna be the last I'm gonna do for that. I'm just gonna add a little bit of reddish color under here where you can see inside his mouth. And this is just the first layer, so it'll dry lighter, and then I'll add maybe a little bit more of it. I'm going to add some more of the Payne's gray in the bird's legs and feet, just where I want to add a little bit darker value, and then I'm going to kind of charge in some of the raw umber. I'll just let that dry, and I'll wait on the hand until that's good and dry, and I'll work on these seeds and get them finished. leave those alone for a little bit, and I may just establish once they dry a little bit more of an outline just on a couple of them, and I'm going to be done with those. Okay, this is dry. I want to work on the hand a little bit. I have my first light wash done on the hand. I want to do a little bit redder or pinker tone to the hand, so I'm going to do a new mixture. I'm going to start with Opera Pink. I'm going to add a little bit of Ultramarine blue, and it gives me a more, of course, purple, but then I'm going to put in some new Gamboge, which is an orangey yellow, which is the opposite, and it gives me this color here. And I want to do kind of a middle tone on the finger, not the darkest shadows that you see here, but I want to give it more form. I'm not wetting it first in this layer. Now, one key to not getting really muddy on skin tones is let each layer dry before you do anything else to it. If you keep trying to build and fix things, then you're going to get it muddy. So now I'm going to add this same color to the rest of the fingers, but I'm watering it down a little bit more to make it a little lighter. While I have this color on my palette, I'm just going to do some splashing here and there. I'm going to add a little bit of a purple mixture, which I'm using Carbazole Violet and Rose of Ultramarine, and in adding a little bit of the Opera Pink too. Maybe I need to tone it down. I'm going to use a little Gamboge. And I'm going to put in some darker shadows in between each of the fingers, or wherever I see the darkest darks. This finger is a little darker than the others because the bird is right above it and blocking the sun from that finger. Now in this part of the hand, right here between the pointer finger and the middle finger, the shadow is redder there. And then the shadows between these other fingers, it's a little more cool color right there, and then there's a cooler shadow here. I'm going to get a little Alizarine crimson, and I've mixed in just a tiny bit of raw umber, and I'm just going to darken this area here. You know what, I'm going to add a little bit of the opera pink to it. It's not quite pink enough. See how much rounder that made that appear? I want to do the same thing just right here and right under the bird's foot. Now I'm going to take some of the purple color and ultramarine violet mixture that I did before, and some ultramarine blue. And if I step back and look at it and it's just too purple, I can add a little bit of that reddish color, drop it in while it's still wet, and it's not quite as purple. This side of the hand is just a little darker than up here in this heel, and I don't want to do too much, so just making it just a hair darker. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and do the background while that's drying. What I want to do is add a little more green here, and to make this side of the face, since it's white, I want it to pop out a little more. So I'm going to take some of this Undersea green, the same green that I've been using here, and I'm going to just add it right here. Maybe bring it down just a little bit. And I want to blend it out some. I'm even gonna just maybe drag it out some. Let's do that again. Put a little bit of green and just, there we go. Do something like that. Maybe a little bit more splash up here. And maybe do something like that on this side too. Give it some heavy. Sometimes I will also take my paper towel and blot up some areas so it's not just a full blob of the color, and you can just wipe some of it out so it has some variation in it. Alright, I'm going to do that really light wash of pink, and then I'll be done with this painting. I want it to be pink, but not fluorescent pink like this opera pink. So I'm going to put in a little tiny bit of green, which is its opposite, just to tone it down a little bit, but I'm going to make it really wet. and washy. And I'm just going to lightly paint over the whole hand. Now I will blot up areas that I just want a lot of light to hit the finger. So I'm going to just blot it with my paper towel, just in a few places. So I'd want to just go in and just add my last darkest dark to outline some of these seeds so that there is some form under here. And so I'm just putting a last little bit of shadow underneath some of these. And underneath, just right at the bottom of his feet. Just some last areas that sometimes will just make a huge difference in the final painting and establishing the darkest darks. Sometimes adding these final darks is scary, and you feel like if you touch it anymore, you're going to overwork it. But if you don't do it, then your painting sometimes won't have any form to it. And so you have to be brave and controlled at the same time, just to make sure you're not overdoing it. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe and hit the like button. And if you would like to have more bonus videos and get more content, sometimes early content or posts, go to my Patreon site linked below and become a patron. Thank you so much, and God bless.